So tell me, before we get started, just, you know, off camera kind of thing, what's happening with the World Summit, if anything?
Well, they've kind of changed function in that they are really the only active members now are Troy and Robert, but they're together as far as I know, and they've been traveling around the sort of Western United States talking to different groups. And, you know, the whole thing has become about, rather than peddling their own product, it's about getting everybody on a similar page. You know, there's all these activist groups, all these protest groups, and they want to say, look, hang on, don't worry too much about your specifics. We all basically want the same thing, so let's get together.
Yeah.
So they've been doing a lot more traveling and a lot more meeting, whereas previously we were all staying where we were and having lots of meetings with the same people, you know. So they're pushing the outreach side of it more than anything, really.
Right. Okay.
But they've obviously done a lot of developmental work, and I'm ashamed to say that I haven't really kept up with it in the last couple of months. So.
Well, no, I mean, I was pretty keen to become a part of that and to become involved in that, but yeah, it just felt like it either didn't know where it wanted to go or wasn't really heading there very quickly, because you know, I was supposed to be the moderator on their forum there, and I went on there and I put on an opening welcoming message kind of thing, and to the best of my knowledge, still now today, not one person has signed up for or left a message on that forum. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
So yeah, it's just as I say, I thought the idea was really exciting, and what Troy and Robert are now doing, going around trying to, I don't know, get disparate groups to realise that actually they're all on the same team and they need to unite if they want to have any effect. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a valuable thing.
Mm.
Do you know a guy called Charles Eisenstein?
Yes, you come across him. I haven't met him personally, but I know his material.
I've read any of his books or seen any of his videos. But he talks about that you know, you've got people who you wouldn't think are in any way connected, but actually they're fighting for the same thing. So the environmental activist and the campaigner for education for orphans or whatever, you know what I mean? They're even though they're doing very different things, they've got very different causes that they're fighting for. Actually, they're doing the same thing. They're fighting for a more caring, sharing world, if you'll forgive the awful turn of phrase, you know what I mean? They're all on the same team in that sense.
Yeah.
And so it's one of his things is to try and get all of these different kinds of people to realise that they do have that common thread, you know what I mean? That they're all looking to see the same kind of change in the world.
Yeah. To extend your example there, I actually found myself saying the same thing at an event not that long ago, and I forget the context, but in fact, even us and Greenpeace and the neo-Nazis actually at the root of it want the same thing, don't they? And of course, we've just had those awful, you know, that Christchurch terror attack. Listen to me. A guy shot some people in a mosque in Christchurch. You know about that. So Jacinda's making hay over it. But at the end of the day, you know, the guy just was worried about the future, wasn't he? You know, really? Yeah. Will we have access to resources in an increasingly scarce-looking future?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they would articulate it to themselves in quite that way, but I agree with you. The source of the whatever it is, the rage, the fear, the whatever it is that brings that out of people, I agree with you. It's that.
Yeah. Mm.
So yeah, I'm feeling a little bit stuck at the moment in that, you know, I'm in Spain and I'm trying to sort of reconstruct my own life along different lines, you know what I mean? Because I kind of feel that until I've done that, not sure how effective an agent of positive change I can be in the world while I am still ensnared in the same kind of stuff myself, you know?
Yes.
So yeah, no, I'm a big admirer of yours, Richard. You've been fighting a good fight for a while now, and you never seem to lose your appetite for it. You never seem to lose your motivation. It's very impressive.
It's funny how often I say this, but you know, one catches up with lots of different people not that often, and every time I'm fascinated by the rhetoric that comes from conversation rather than from deliberate study or sort of methodical development, just because most of my work is talking to people, and I'm amazed at what comes out. And so I love sort of unscripted conversations where we just kind of see how we get on, and that's when the good stuff comes out. And fortunately, much of my work in Greymouth is based around having conversations on the street with ordinary people. It's not high tech, it's not high leverage, it's just sort of face to face, one on one, or one on a small group of very organic conversation. And I think that's where the good stuff is. You know, it's not planned, it's not intended, it's just see what comes out. And I think there's a subconscious element to that, you know, where your subconscious brain is 90% of your brain capacity or something, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, more, I believe, but yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And if you can access that material, then you'll do a much better job, I think, on the whole.
Well, the thing is, we do access that material all the time, but because we're so convinced that all there is to us is our conscious, you know, our waking consciousness, our reason, you know what I mean? Because we're convinced that's all there is. We don't pay attention to our intuitions and our feelings and our gut reactions and stuff like that. And that's what those things are. That's our subconscious, which has access to all of that additional data. It's sending you a message saying, don't do that, don't do that. Right? And you feel it in your gut. Hang on, something's wrong here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really believe that intuition and gut feelings is exactly that. It's your subconscious trying to communicate with your conscious. I really believe that.
Yeah. I watched a great Gabor Mate lecture the other day where he said exactly that, and how frequently they are in conflict.
Yeah.
And he asked the audience, you know, raise your hand if you've ever had a gut feeling and gone against it and later regretted it.
Oh, God. Who can't put their hand up to that? Jesus.
And conversely, how many people have got a gut feeling, gone with it, and regretted it? And hardly any hands out.
Yeah, I mean, and you do sometimes. You think, okay, my gut let me down there. But it's definitely rare. And you don't feel as bad about it, right? Because at least you followed your gut. Okay, it fucked up, but at least you followed it. And that...
I felt it was the right thing at the time.
Yeah.
Sorry, Eric, what I was building up to there, what I frequently find myself saying to people is, oh, how's it going? Haven't seen you for ages, Richard. And with utter sincerity, I frequently say, do you know what? I think it's going better than ever. More positive. Sorry, this is in answer to your question. You know, you seem to keep going, but I'm constantly refreshed and sort of goaded on by the positive results that we're seeing. And so it gets better and better, actually. And I'm more positive and more optimistic now than I've ever been, you know, in the last 10 years. And I've been up there plenty of times, but it's an ever ascending pathway. You know, we just seem to get closer and closer to what we all aspire to, you know. And even, I mean, forgive me, are we recording yet?
It did, it records automatically. So we're recording the whole thing, and then I can cut whatever we don't want later.
Okay, yeah, because obviously some topics are very emotive, and it can be quite. You've got to be careful not to upset people. You know, it's very, very easy when everyone's so jumpy. But even the mosque attacks in Christchurch were indicative of a change, or at least the response to them was indicative of a change in the sentiment of New Zealanders as a whole.
In what way?
Previously, there's frequently been a sort of a New Zealand very generalized attitude that all that kind of thing goes on in the rest of the world. That's all because they're mad. It's because they're in SIS, or because they're Americans, or because it's the crazy British. We don't do that here in New Zealand, and now we do. And so what I've really been up against in the last 10 years is the sort of naysayers who've got this position that, oh, it's all fine, you just need to work harder, you know. And the anomalies that we witness overseas aren't really real. That's just something that happens in these funny places where they're all fucked up.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen here. And when these things start to happen here, then the few, and it's amazing, I said few, the remaining naysayers who think that it's all going to be fine and we start exporting coal again and we can still expand dairy and sell more wine and we're going to create jobs and we're going to have green technologies and green tourism and, you know, everything's okay. That relatively small now proportion of the population is feeling increasingly isolated now that there's been, you know, 50 people shot in one incident in
So
Christchurch.
that's really, so it's had that big an impact on the general sentiment in the country at large. I mean, obviously beyond, so the reverberations have gone out well beyond the incident itself.
Yeah, very much so, very much so.
Is that
And
the
I mean,
first
of
time
course,
something like that's happened in? Is that the first time something like that's happened in New Zealand?
Oh, yeah, certainly of that scale.
Mass shooting, some kind of thing. Yeah. And so, what was it? A couple of guys just walked into a mosque and opened up with automatic weapons, did they? Is that
one guy, semi-automatic, very well planned. Of course, extremely embarrassing for the police and the secret intelligence services who missed the whole thing. This guy had been all over the world, traveling, visiting extreme right-wing, white supremacist type organizations, gathering material. He had a website and a blog, and they missed it. And this guy, I mean, weapons, there's guns everywhere here. I mean, I bet, and I don't know, but I bet there's more guns per capita there are in the United States. It's crazy, the guns here. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, in the US, I heard a stat recently. In the US, there are more guns than pets.
Yeah, I believe it, actually.
Yeah, I found that an astonishing stat. I mean, God, you know, I don't know what it's like in the US with pets, but in the UK, I would say on average, every single household has a pet or two. You know what I mean? When you throw in cats, dogs, parrots, rabbits, guinea pigs, do you know what I mean? Hamsters. You know, I reckon every household's got a couple of pets. So, yeah, that's an extraordinary number of guns. And you reckon it's worse in New Zealand? I mean, obviously not the absolute numbers, but per capita, yeah, you reckon it's worse there. Is that, I guess, because of lots of people have land, right? And so they need the guns as protection against wolves, foxes, whatever, right?
Very popular.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's funny because it's one of the things that makes this country, excuse me, sort of great and pivotal actually in what we're doing and why I think we're going to succeed in becoming the first money-free country. Long angle of approach there. Because of the original aspirations of the first settlers, and I don't mean the whalers and the seal hunters, I mean the wealthy, educated and aspirational British, mostly, that came in the late 19th century. They weren't economic refugees. They weren't fleeing terror or persecution. They were looking for a better life in the new world. And they were starting to have second thoughts about the colonial imperial march of British aspirations across the world, you know, at gunpoint. And so we have the Treaty of Waitangi. So they effectively did a deal with the natives and granted them considerable rights, which still are very significant today. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. That's another.
Well, when you say natives, more accurately, previous invaders, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, I mean,
the Maoris came in and wiped out the indigenous people, didn't they? Yes.
Yeah. They don't really like to be reminded of that. But,
no, I'm sure. I'm sure they don't.
No. But it can sort of get silly. But it was definitely different when they came to New Zealand. And much of it was to escape the hierarchy and the class divisions that were prevalent in 19th century England. So we have a few things like the quarter-acre plots. No one could build a house on a site that was smaller than a quarter of an acre, which is enough to have a pig and a few chooks and grow a few fruit trees, kind of thing. And there's still, of course, they've all been built. There's now 31 A, B, C, and D on every bloody plot, in the towns. But that was the aspiration, so that everyone could be self-sufficient. And also the things like access to the countryside and the waterways, particularly. There's a thing called the Queen's Chain, which means basically anybody can go anywhere within a chain, a cricket field length of any named waterway centre. So even when you're just driving around the countryside, if there's a little creek, if it's got a name, then you're allowed to go into that creek and hunt and fish and camp there, gather firewood, and that's all over the country. And they fiercely defend that right. And that's very, very important to New Zealanders to retain those freedoms of access. And this came from hunting, didn't it? And so bizarrely, in this country, even the poorest people can go and hunt big game and feed themselves. They can go fishing. and they can go and ride dirt bikes in the countryside, for example, which in Britain are very exclusive pursuits. You know, to go any sort of decent fishing or hunting is hardly accessible to anybody, actually, unless you're very wealthy or very well connected.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends where you live. I mean, there's some really nice fishing rivers in Wales, and you can get a license which allows you to fish on, I believe, any of the rivers. And it's relatively inexpensive. Yeah, so I think it probably depends on where you are. There is some good fishing there, but you know, I mean, this is one of the problems that we hope to confront, right, with the change of paradigm, is the degradation of things like waterways. You know what I mean? That you can't just, most waterways, you can't just go and catch fish. You know what I mean? Stuff there, shellfish especially, you can't eat that shit. It's poisonous.
Yeah, and that's again a massive driver, making life easier for us.
Yeah, right. Well, it should be anyway. It should be.
Because we
I don't know
wrecked
if
all the
you're
water.
paying any attention to, and I don't know if it's got as far as New Zealand. I know it's an international thing. Extinction Rebellion, have they made it over there?
Yep. Oh, not physically, but certainly, you know, over the internet. Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
I mean,
okay.
have they got a decent kind of target, or are they just a bit like Occupy?
Their target is anthropomorphic climate change. That's their thing. So they blocked up various different routes in central London with placards and boats and various different stuff. They glued themselves to the front of the stock exchange. I mean, it was at least initially for me, it was quite inspiring. You know what I mean? To actually see people mobilize and organize and commit to getting arrested if necessary. You know what I mean? To you know, to go and send out a message. But I've since been watching a little bit of, you know, the sort of alternative side of it on the internet, and it's quite interesting, the backgrounds, a couple of the leaders of it. You know, they worked for NGOs which were financed by telecommunications and energy companies. And so, and also, I mean, I've been watching a few things. A couple of good points have been made. People are saying things like, you know, if you look at previous protests, look at the anti-Iraq war protest, look at protests for gay rights, LGBT rights, that kind of thing. You know, these are marches that I've been on, the Million Mask March, I go on that every year. And, you know, you are very, very carefully channeled as to where you are and are not allowed to go by the police. Do you know what I mean? They don't let you just stand in the middle of the road and block traffic. So how come these people are allowed to block Marble Arch and Oxford Circus and Hyde Park Corner for 10 days? Do you know what I mean? How come, with no real pushback whatsoever from the police? They blocked 5 bridges in London a couple of weeks before that, right? Again, with no real pushback from the police. And we're not talking about tens of thousands of people, you know what I mean? We're talking about a few hundred, couple of thousand at the most, you know? We're not talking about...
could be managed.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not talking about really large people. One of the phrases I heard was that they were pushing against an open door. And, you know, within 24 hours of their 10-day protest coming to an end, they'd had assurances from Jeremy Corbyn and from Michael Gove that they would meet with them and, you know, enter into good faith discussions. And, you know, their 3 demands were that they wanted the government to declare a climate change emergency immediately, like a national emergency kind of thing, and to set up people's assemblies up and down the country who would consult on how to best deal with the problem of climate change. And so, yeah, I've got a couple of problems with it. Number one, climate change. I don't like the term. I had a conversation with Nick not very long ago. It'll go up on the Money Free channel soon. And he made a very, very good point. You know, if instead of calling it climate change, we called it environmental degradation, yeah, this would be a very, very much more encompassing term, you know, because I don't care how certain everyone says, you know, 97% of climate scientists agree, blah, 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 blah. What they actually agree on is that the world is warming, right? That the oceans are warming and that carbon dioxide levels are increasing. This is what they agree on. But actually, there's very substantial disagreement as to whether carbon dioxide increases precede or succeed temperature rises, because carbon dioxide, there's 50 times as much carbon dioxide. I didn't know this until recently. There's 50 times as much carbon dioxide dissolved in the oceans as there is in the atmosphere, right? And as the oceans get warmer, their ability to hold carbon dioxide decreases, the solubility decreases. So as the oceans get warmer, they kick more carbon dioxide out into the atmosphere, right? And so what a lot of climate scientists are actually saying is that they believe that the carbon dioxide rises may be a consequence of warming and not a cause of warming, right? And so there is no doubt that the oceans are getting warmer, but that it is that which is the cause of the carbon dioxide. So to attack carbon dioxide levels is to completely miss the fucking point, right? And anyway, even if, and also the other thing is we produce something like 35 out of 700 gigatons of the carbon dioxide that the Earth cycles through every year, right? So it's like less than 5% of the total global contribution is made by man. And I get the idea it's a delicate system and it only takes maybe a couple of percent to upset it and blah, blah, blah. I understand all of that. Sorry, I sidetracked myself there. I was going to say something else.
Well, are we focused on the right thing? I think is what.
Correct,
what you
exactly right. That was exactly my point. And so that by focusing on carbon dioxide, we are being distracted from, and or in a way prevented from doing anything about a lot of the other ecological catastrophes, which are very definitely, very certainly going on right under our noses. You know what I mean? So it's starting to worry me. I heard one conspiracy theory guy said that the end game here is to convince everyone that the threat of global warming, human carbon dioxide caused global warming, is so immediate and so catastrophic that we have to, rebuild our entire energy and transport infrastructure away. And the only way to do that is to take all the money out of your pension funds.
I'll let the dog in. Yes, I mean, I've got these 5 parameters that, if there's one thing I quote most repeatedly, it's probably that. Hello, dog. Hello, dog. And the first of those parameters, which we've fairly recently developed as a species, is the letter C. So I'll probably come back to that. Climate change. But I immediately pounce on people and say, I don't really want to talk about climate change, and we don't even need to. It's not really relevant at this stage. Did man cause this, etc. At the end of the day, just if you're in a spaceship, don't burn the rubbish, in amongst the air that you're going to breathe. And that's all that really matters. There's plenty of other reasons not to do things that may or may not cause climate harm. And they're all driven by money at the end of the day. And I always feel these arguments, we immediately kind of get onto a anti-poisons or anti-abortion or climate change argument, and we've already lost the point. And we can argue and fall out about it and send each other emails and build websites about it, go on protests. We've already missed the point. Jacinda and co are all in Paris patting each other on the back about what they're going to do about the evils of Facebook. Yeah. And they've already missed the point, and all that energy, all that angst and dedication will go into something that's actually a symptom and not a cause.
I was just going to use exactly that word. It's attacking symptoms, not causes. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All of it. And I mean, climate change is just the latest one. I tend to agree with you. If we didn't do things so fucking stupidly and wastefully, then we wouldn't be having to worry about these things. It wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, and getting people just to back up.
If the education of our children were to include an appreciation of the fact that we are deeply connected to, in fact, we are birthed ultimately by the planet, right? You know what I mean? If our upbringing were to include this over and over and over again, then people would act very differently. So sorry, you were going to say something. I interrupted you.
Yeah. Well, again, instead of in New Zealand, it gets quite easy to back up. We need to get people to think beyond the superficial, there's been a shooting, ban guns reaction. Yeah. And ask, okay, just stop a minute, back up and think, well, why did the guy want to shoot anyone in the first place? Yeah. Why do we have threats to our climate? Why do people hunt whales? Why do people beat their wives? Don't just have better surveillance in houses to prevent, to catch them when they do beat their wives. We're so reactive. It's almost it's worse than childlike, actually. But here it's very, very obvious because there's so few people and they're so intimately connected, especially on the West Coast where, my campaign is going on. And I think there's a much shorter link between the cause and the effect of what people are doing. Whereas I dare say in Britain or Spain or something, a bigger, more developed, deeper civilization, shall we say, people are much more disconnected from the root causes of their problems that they experience. Whereas here they're very direct. So here we see dairy farming, which is our biggest export, and that props everything up, basically, the sale of basically milk powder overseas. That pays for basically everything, that's the short version. But it's disastrous for the animals, for the farmers, and for the environment and the water. And people see that very clearly. And so if we want to address those harm things that we see, that you can't eat the food in the water, you can't access farms anymore because they're all like electrified prisons, because they're huge corporate owned now, most of these dairy farms. They're not family friendly farms that they used to be. And the depression and the isolation of the farmers and their staff is horrific. The suicide rate amongst farmers is amongst the worst in the country. And they're all going into debt horrifically. And of course, the product that it produces isn't even really intended, in natural terms, for human consumption anyway. So the whole thing is flawed from start to finish. But it's very easy to point out here, because we're a relatively shallow civilization, in that regard, that dairy actually serves no intrinsic purpose except to get money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't actually contribute towards the manufacture of computers or electricity or food or dog leads, they're completely separate. And if we didn't do dairy, the land, and of course it's all the best land in this country, could basically refer back to wilderness, because we don't need it. The food that New Zealand exports is extremely expensive. I mean, even Kiwis can't afford it. So the Bangladeshis definitely don't get any of it. It's very high end, very high margin niche products for rich people, not for hungry people. And so the actual, and this is difficult for Kiwis sometimes, the actual produce of New Zealand serves no genuine purpose on the world table. It's only for rich people.
It's just to bring money into. Just playing devil's advocate here. I mean, obviously, I'm on the same team as you, right? But just for the sake of playing devil's advocate, to what extent does the money that these trades generate and bring into the country allow New Zealanders to buy goods from overseas that they might not otherwise be able to acquire?
Entirely, yeah. That's the only way we can do that. And that's once people get to that stage, I tend to, especially on a first conversation, I tend to leave them alone, because it's if you've got that far, then you're well on the road to seeing that we're going to be better off without this money thing. So, and it's a funny question, actually. I really always enjoy it. What about our imports and exports? And there's actually about 8 different answers to that question. And this is where the face-to-face conversation is so important, because if you're talking to an older person, we'll say, well, look, in the 1950s, when you came over, or when you were growing up, we didn't have imports at all. We had Morris miners came on a boat every 8 weeks. And if you were very wealthy, you could afford one. But in fact, we made everything that we need here. How bad was it? And for an old person, actually, we don't need all that crap at the warehouse and in these selling Chinese rubbish that goes straight to landfill. We don't even need the imports anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what. I mean, for example, electronic goods would be a good one. You just mentioned China electronic goods. I mean, how much of that do you manufacture? Because I mean, certainly in most of the Western world, all of that manufacturing has been outsourced to Vietnam and Korea and China and so on and so on. I mean, I don't know that we have the capability to do that shit anymore.
No, but it's funny when you really talk to people, they're not even that sure if we want it anyway. Again, especially on the West Coast, where
they don't want their phones and their laptops.
Well, there's a lot of pushback, because it's not brought anything tangible, and it's not brought anything good. And most people think, or frequently I get, it was better off before we had them. At least you could talk to people that weren't looking down at their screens.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not. I have some sympathy for that view, but I'm not sure that that's going to fly on a global scale. Unfortunately,
Absolutely,
they're pretty attached to their devices, And anyway, the laptops and phones, much as there's many awful things about them, particularly in the social media sphere. I mean, these things also have the capacity to be incredibly powerful tools for good, right? For education, for information, for connectivity. You know what I mean? They can be incredibly powerful tools for the elevation of the spirit of man. They don't have to be destructive. I mean, I agree they largely are right now, but that's a fault of the way we use them, not of the technology itself.
Yeah. Yes, and I would say a leveraging of the negative aspects of our current system.
Yeah, exactly. It's in their interest, exactly, to have us jump every time a little message comes through, because it might, it might be selling us something we want, or at least it's something that they can convince us that we want.
Yeah. So, okay, so that's two ways of thinking about that. A third way is back in 1893, when New Zealand adopted enfranchisement, voting for women, they didn't worry about what the Saudis would make of it.
Yeah.
They thought it was the right thing to do. This is, and I would absolutely, especially in Greymouth on the West Coast, actually, and that's a whole other conversation, which I'm glad you remind me of. This probably is the leading edge of human civilization here, this place. And so what we do may seem a bit out there to, how should we say, less civilized countries, but it may well be the right thing. But we shouldn't wait for their approval before we do it. And so this is like a spearhead of progress, and there will be unanswered questions, but in the short term, we can manage without brand new iPhones, in the short term. And I think because of the nature of change and also the exponential rate of acceleration of change, even if the fact that we're talking about this today means that there's a knock-on effect. And just jumping forward for a minute, if New Zealand went money-free in September 2020, which is still my kind of favoured date, actually, for this taking place.
You actually think it could happen as soon as that?
I do, and all my experience, and I don't do much else, reinforces that. But if that happens, then Australia, our nearest neighbour, won't have waited in the 19th century to see what happens. And of course, the rest of the world is so intimately connected that when a positive change, or indeed a negative one, takes place in one place, because of that technology, it can be spread around the world very quickly.
Yeah.
Just give you a quick example of, talking about climate vulnerability, let's say. Everybody on the planet, certainly anybody of anything like any sort of influence, now is aware of climate vulnerability. All 8 billion people. And that news has traveled around the world in, probably half of our lifetimes or less.
Yeah.
It's gone all around the world. And that's some of the worst news that humanity has ever had. Whereas the prospects of a resource-based economy is probably the best news that humanity has ever had in all of eternity. So how long is that going to take to get around the world? And I can't see the Australians saying, no, we like our capitalism. It's all great over here. In New Zealand, they've suddenly leapt into a 21st century utopian paradise, like overnight, and they've solved their climate problems, their health problems, their animal welfare, their mental health. They've solved them overnight. Should we do that? So I don't think the rest of the world...
2020 is what? That's 9 months from now. That's 9 months from... I mean, God, I would love to wake up. I'd love to wake up on the morning of... When's your election?
This next one is October the 12th this year.
Oh, sorry. I assumed that when you said February 2020, I assumed you meant that was... I assumed that was a general election. So why it's 2020? Why did you pick that? Why did you pick that particularly?
Well, it came out in a conversation with a group, actually, in an Auckland sort of summit that we had a couple of years ago. And I love graphs. You know, my background is in big aviation and engineering and aircraft operations. Excuse me. And we do a lot of trend plotting using graphs and mathematical models to try and predict the future. So we're trying to work out how long can that engine stay on the wing of that airliner before we have to pull it because of a crack in the turbine blade or a breakdown in a bearing. You know, you don't want to pull it too early. These are expensive bit of kit, but by the same token, you don't want to pull it too late because you don't want an accident. So there's a lot of sophisticated technology, and it happens in all big industry. You know, ISO 9000 is all about trying to assure quality, not just control quality, but, you know, quality assurance is. So we're trend plotting, and what we've been doing with both, I'm going to layer up some graphs now. When you're plotting trends of social breakdown, mental health challenges, environmental challenges, all the things that are going wrong in the world, and if you also at the same time plot the growing awareness of solutions, then you see that they start to coincide at a point in the future. And absolutely, they're exponential. And anytime you get near anything exponential, it gets really exciting really quickly.
Yeah.
And it's very, very important that we don't use historical precedent to predict future rate of change.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Are you familiar with Terence McKenna?
Oh, it sounds familiar, but remind me.
He spent his life investigating, both personally and as a medical man, the actions of psychedelics. And towards the end of his life, he gave an interview. No, but he was a really well respected. I mean, he was the man. You know what I mean? He was, and it was really articulate, really funny. You know what I mean? Really easy to listen to. Anyway. He has this theory, which he put forward shortly before he died, that time itself is accelerating. And by that, he means that time, what is time other than the distance between events, right? You know, time is punctuated by the occurrence of events within time. If there's nothing going on, then there is no time, right? If there's nothing happening, if there's no... do you see what I mean? There is, What he's saying is that as evolution proceeds, more and more stuff goes on, more and more levels of organization are reached, more and more, greater and greater complexity, greater and greater novelty. And so there's just more stuff going on, right? And there, as a consequence, time is speeding up. And that is also an exponential thing. And so, I mean, unfortunately, this falls down a little bit because he was one of the believers that 2012, you know, whatever it was, December 2012 was going to be the, you know, like some transformative, a sudden transformative thing. I mean, I've never bought into the sudden transformation thing. You know what I mean? Like you wake up one morning and all of a sudden everything's different. I've never bought into that. Everything's a process, right? And it may be a chaotic and messy and turbulent one, but nevertheless, it's a process.
Yeah.
So you're from my knowledge of physics, particularly chaotic systems, transition from one equilibrium state to a different equilibrium state is not possible without a highly chaotic, turbulent in-between phase. So do you see that transition from this equilibrium, you know, the money market equilibrium, to an RBE type equilibrium, do you think that can be accomplished without a great deal of turbulent mess in the middle?
Wow, what a feast. So I'll backtrack slightly to an interview I did here actually in 2012 on my birthday, bizarrely, with a very wise reporter from a newspaper. And they did a big article and on the money-free proposal. And she really liked it, and I was really thrilled, you know, to get that much. I got a big chunk of the newspaper. It was fantastic. My first decent outing in the press, really. And she liked the idea, but she said, I think it's going to take a massive catastrophe, Richard, to bring this about. And that bugged me. I mean, this is 7 years ago. It's been itching away at me for years. But when I started working on the West Coast, I suppose about a year ago, which is, I mean, it's only 3 hours drive from here. We're right in the center of the South Island. So we're kind of right on the top. We live on both the West and the East Coast, effectively. When I started working on the West Coast, which is a very, very different region to the rest of the country, I realized that this major catastrophe that people, I think she was right, had to go through to realize that something's really got to change, and it may be us that has to change it. That major catastrophe actually doesn't necessarily need to be shared at the same time. So it may not be a 9/11 or a Christchurch mosque shooting. It may be the fact that your daughter took her own life, or your mother died of cancer, or your business collapsed and you lost your home. That is your 9/11. That's your personal catastrophe. And because of the West Coast's precarious history and position in loads of different terms, nearly everybody there has been touched by tragedy in some way, whether it's a flood, and there's a lot of social problems there, a lot of economic challenges, and a lot of climate change challenges. And they're very isolated, and they know all about tragedy. We had a horrific mining accident 8 years ago. 29 guys died in 2010. And, you know, that shouldn't really happen in 21st century mining in a first world country. I mean, it shouldn't happen anywhere, but, you know, that's unprecedented in the modern era to have things like that. And it always happens on the West Coast. So these people have been through that massive transformative experience and thus are ready for change. And I think you said, and it was intriguing me actually, you said there needs to be a period of chaos between the money world and the no money world. But of course we're grey creatures, aren't we? And so we already have a lot of experience and activity in the no money world anyway.
Yeah.
Because we don't charge our dog, you know, we don't charge our family for toilet paper. We do a lot of volunteer work in the community. If someone falls over in the street, we just help them. We go to libraries. We don't own shopping trolleys. We just use them and we take them back. We hire cars. We hire hotel rooms. You know, we're actually quite used to a sharing type economy and environment. And in fact, it's not as alien as it seems. And I don't think it'll be in fact, I said this a long time ago, I think that the transformation will be unopposed and it will be almost effortless, actually, and we'll just ease into it overnight. And again, we're going to be very careful using historical precedent of change to predict future change. Everything's different in the 21st century, and you know, a revolution can be, I think, in fact, Jacques Fresco said, a revolution of consciousness.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be.
Well, Jacques Fresco is another one that believes in the necessity of collapse before the Venus Project or RBE will be.
Yes, but I think we see collapse.
I was actually talking from the perspective of history that, you know, big changes have always been accompanied by chaotic collapse in the past. I wasn't being guided by history, but more of an understanding of the nature of complex systems, that they, you know, complex systems defined as lots and lots of individual parts, but whose behavior affects the other individual parts. And human society is a perfect example of a complex system, right? They tend to settle down into their own equilibrium. They find internal methods of organization amongst themselves, right? And they settle down into an equilibrium state. But they're capable of many, many different equilibrium states. But shifting from one to another always involves a transition through chaos. And while you're in that chaos, there's no way to predict what the next equilibrium is going to look like. You know what I mean? Now, I know that we have agency, and when we're talking about purely physical systems like turbulent flow of air, for example, the individual particles in that flow of air do not have agency. They don't have, you know, the ability to make choices, whereas we do. So it's a little bit different, but nevertheless, on a mass scale, human society very much is a complex system and is therefore bound by the rules of them as explained by chaos theory.
Yes. However, and I've never said this before, don't you think that chaos, because we are precipitating a change of mentality, nothing else, we just have to change our perspective. that chaotic period is actually where many people are now, and some of us have been through it earlier than others with our midlife
Absolutely,
crises.
we could be in that chaotic period right now, and I think actually you make a very good point. That could be exactly what the explanation is, that we are in that right now, and which is why
feels like it, doesn't it? You know,
no, but that's Trump, that's Brexit, that's the rise of the far right. You know what I mean? That's the complete disorganization on the left, the mad political correctness and identity politics everywhere. Do you know what I mean? The inability of governments to respond to even the most basic needs of their people anymore. I mean, Congress doesn't even try and pretend to actually represent the people in the US anymore. They've given up even on the pretense of it. You know what I mean? You know, it's all. So yeah, I think you actually may very well, even though it doesn't feel like it, because we're talking about, you know, one human life or a decade or whatever, in terms of evolutionary time of civilization is nothing, right? And so yeah, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what it is. We're in that period of chaos right now.
Yeah, and a lot of people are very.
Don't know what the next this equilibrium is broken down. We're in a period of chaos, and we don't know what the next one's going to look like yet.
No, and a lot of people are obviously very evidently actually in different places in that chaotic period. So it is like a mass upheaval of humanity, with effectively, you know, the blood and the carnage and the burning and the fighting of a conventional revolution / invasion / insurrection, but it's taking place in our heads, isn't it? And so people are depressed and frustrated and violent and alcoholic and dysfunctional because of that internal. Well, they haven't gone through the revolution yet, so they're still in the fighting, pitchforks burning stage. Whereas, you know, those of us, I guess, have been thinking, started earlier, I guess, for one reason or another, divorce, parental bereavement, midlife crisis, etc. Started and now see the fruits, I suppose, on the other side, something like that. Yeah. Well, that's I think we hit a really good point there. That's Robert Graham would call that co-creation, and it's fantastic actually. And yeah, only by conversation can you. Again, I mean, we didn't make that up, did we? That just came on its own, you know.
Yeah. No, listen, I don't know how many people are going to end up watching this based on previous experience of making these videos. Not very many. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No. I can assure any viewers that this is entirely unscripted and impromptu. Richard and I, we know each other a little bit. We haven't spoken in quite a while, though. So
that's good stuff. Yeah, and I mean that's something amazing that technology has enabled, hasn't it, to allow, you know,
absolutely, and for this stuff to be broadcast. You know, I mean, I've gained a huge amount of perspective, you know, broadening of perspective and deepening of understanding of all sorts of things by listening to exactly this kind of thing, conversations between people, between, you know, experts in their fields who are being questioned by or in conversation with someone who has enough of an understanding about what they're about that they can ask them sensible questions and guide it for the layman, you know what I mean, without letting them get, and you know, it's fantastic. It really is. I don't know if you know, he's a comedian called Russell Brand. He's one of the, he's become one of the best interviewers I know on the internet. I mean, he's great. He builds a fantastic rapport with his guests. He gets really varied people talking about really interesting things. Some of it really out there, some of it quite mainstream. You know what I mean? He seems to be completely unbigoted, if you know what I mean, in terms of who he'll talk to and what he'll talk to them about. You know. And I love this. I love this kind of thing. Jordan Peterson, I've been listening to quite a lot, and although you know, as soon as he strays into the world of politics, he pisses me off. But when he talks psychology, when he talks mythology, you know, this kind of thing, you know, he's got a lot of valuable stuff to say. Jordan Hall's another one. Have you heard about him? He wrote what was it called? I can't remember what the name of the document was, but it was an essay after Trump was elected. He's written a series of them. Sort of an analysis of the state of society, and he's very much on your page that we're in a time of chaos, and that the blue church, as he calls it, the blue church being the old established institutions, the blue church is unable to cope with the circumstances of the new world. Things just changing too quickly, and in opposition to the blue church is the red. Oh, the red religion. That's it. The red religion is in opposition to the. So we are part of the red religion, right? So the red religion is this insurgency which is coming about, and it's manifesting in all sorts of different ways. And the insurgency doesn't wield the power of the blue church, right? The blue church still controls all the money, all the political institutions, all the weaponry. You know what I mean? That's still the blue church. But what the red insurgency has is the ability to move quickly and adapt quickly and change quickly. You know what I mean? And so they pop up one place, and the blue church, in its cumbersome, slow but powerful way, stamps on that. But long before that's happened, it's popped up over here and over here. It's like whack-a-mole. You know what I mean? There's no way the blue church can win this game in the long run, but at the moment the blue church still holds all the big weapons. You know what I mean? Both literal and metaphorical. The blue church still holds all the big weapons. And I really like this analysis. That feels to me like, you know, like the red insurgency must inevitably win, right? Because it's the new thing, you know, and you know, it's the evolutionarily the red insurgency must win, and the blue church has no hope of once and for all, finally forever stamping out the red insurgency. It can't be done, right? And so however strongly it tries to repress it, sooner or later it must come through. And as I say, that feels to me to be a pretty accurate analysis of where we are right now.
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, I've written it down. I'll look him up. He sounds good. Again, I'm always looking for New Zealand points of difference because it is so different here. It's hard to imagine how different it is to anywhere else in the world, actually. And when it comes to, I love that blue church. That's excellent. I'll use that. Yeah,
he's really good. You should honestly find as much as you can and listen to. He's really says so many interesting things and talks at such a very, very, very high level. For me, anyway, I have to rewind quite often and listen again. I didn't quite, you know what I mean, too much to absorb it all in one go.
Make a few notes. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. But see, in New Zealand, the blue church is not that far away. And I frequently, you know, weekend before last, I spent time with 3 members of parliament, 2 of them cabinet ministers, you know, just out in the country, a little local event. That's what you can do here. These people are that accessible that it makes all the difference. And even if you don't know them personally, you will almost undoubtedly know a relative of theirs.
Yeah.
And so people, you know, I often wonder if Theresa May and so on, you know, do they actually exist? I'm not suggesting that they don't, but you don't see politicians
not
in
as
Britain,
human beings, though. No, not as human beings. I mean, you can see it. It really, it's not just Theresa May, although she is particularly bad at it. But you see it all in so many senior politicians when they're asked a question. You can see a question that they weren't expecting, right? That they don't have a scripted answer for. You can see the wheels turning. Okay, what can I say here? What's that going to look like? What's that? Do you know what I mean? How's that going to be perceived? Rather than just answering the question.
The fucking question.
They just can't do it. And I feel sorry for them. I mean, Russell Brand has said this as well. Right? As a human being, they are a human being, right? And you have to feel sorry for them. That you can't help it. I mean, no one forced them to take that job, right? But nevertheless, as one human being, no, you can't feel sorry for them.
Yeah, that's the beauty of New Zealand. I quite by chance actually stumbled upon a 1980s Prime Minister's autobiography in a free stall, actually, so it wasn't widely read, but I like reading political history, especially when it's kind of pint size, you know, and so it started me on a bit of a train. And when you start talking, Prime Minister Bill Rowling, for example, he used to teach in the village school here, that kind of thing. I've met, we've only lived here 15 years. I've personally met three prime ministers. And I mean, who the heck am I, you know? I've frequently been on stage with cabinet ministers and things, and they are very accessible. And, you know, our children go to the same schools, that kind of thing. It's very, very important. And reading these books by and about the prime ministers, it occurred to me that the person that wrote them, if it wasn't autobiographical, knew them extremely well and had lived kind of alongside them for their whole life. Whereas I bet there's 1,000 books about Margaret Thatcher written by people who probably weren't even alive when she was in power.
Yeah.
There's that detachment. But what I really loved about it, again, was the common theme that they all talked about the same people and the same incidents and the same cities, and that you could see a direct cause and effect to things like the anti-nuclear legislation, the anti-apartheid movement, things that actually changed history for this country can be traced back to conversations and activities that took place amongst people that are accessible and that truly exist and that live there now.
Yeah.
And so suddenly you realize that the whole thing is actually still controllable by a logical, rational means. Whereas I would say that legislation, I don't know, let's say anti-hunting legislation in the UK, you know, why did that really come about? You know, is it pressure from overseas or from the judiciary or from the people or from vested interest in Europe? I mean, who can say why things happen?
And it was overturned again later on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And yet all the people's angst and all that misery and everything.
Exactly. A big hoo-ha in the public arena where the reality is 95% of the population don't really give a shit. You know what I mean? It doesn't affect them directly. Don't give a shit. Yeah. Yeah, but it's a good example of how political correctness can mobilize large numbers of people, because, you know, most of the people who are demonstrating on one side or the other have no direct connection to hunting at all. You know what I mean? It's an ideological position they've taken. It's not based in their own personal experiences or whatever, you know. They've just, hunting is evil, or people who want to ban hunting are evil, and boom, you know, And what's the 5G situation like in New Zealand? Are they talking about 5G there? Are they talking about, because I mean, New Zealand in many ways would be an ideal place for it, right? Half your population's in one city. That's all you've really got to cover is Auckland, and you know that's more than half your population done, isn't it?
Well, if I can start with, oh yes, it's just such a hotbed here as well. For fuck's sake, it's so ridiculous. But if I can start with broadband, because we had dial-up internet in the early days, and then the National, which was a conservative right-wing government, decided that we should have broadband, and it was going to be expensive because of our population, you know, the way we're spread out, the geography and everything. So the only way to pay for it, and I had this argument with a serving cabinet minister in public on a public stage, saying that they had to sell off our public utilities, the airline, the water, and the electricity generating and transmission companies to pay for superfast broadband, because we've got to stay competitive with the rest of the world or we'll get left behind. And I said at the time, and I think I was quite proud of it, you know, off the cuff, profound statement, that superfast broadband is actually, it's merely a Trojan horse to ensure that every little girl on the west coast of this country, where traditionally people have gone to escape this kind of thing, she will have a smart device in her pocket. So instead of skipping around the field barefoot in a dress, she will now be checking on her makeup, her teeth, her body shape, her hair,
Instagram post.
And the beast will get to everybody, and it has, you know, and it's horrific. And I think 5G is just more of the same, you know, and of course, even more intrusive. And
well, but there's radiation issues with 5G. I mean, it's a whole different bandwidth to previous kind of connectivity, to previous communications. It's a much shorter it's a much shorter wavelength of radiation that they're using, and there has been zero testing of the effects of this radiation. They're just rolling it out, not having tested it at all. And there are a lot. And listen, I don't know. I haven't done any testing. I haven't even seen any data. But it seems to me entirely reasonable that testing should be done before a system like this is rolled out. That in principle seems entirely reasonable to me.
Yeah, they haven't got time to test, have they? In the modern
I don't
marketplace, there's
understand
no
what the
time to
rush is.
test.
4G seems pretty all right to me. I mean, I live on 4G. I don't have a hardline internet connection here. I live entirely on 4G, and it's
Yeah,
fine. It's fine. You get
yeah,
the occasional bad patch, you know what I mean? But it's absolutely fine. So I don't see what the rush is with 5G. Fortunately,
no,
I'm in the middle of fucking nowhere. They're not going to be putting 5G here for a very long time. There's just not the population. I mean, half the people here
yeah,
don't have internet access as it is. The average age here is like
no,
65. Half the people here, at least half the people here, don't have internet connections as it is.
yeah, yeah. Fantastic. However, be careful because I've quoted in the past that in many parts of remote Africa, they got Coca-Cola and Marlboro a long time before they got medicine and water. You know, um, the tentacles of the monetary system reach a very, very long way.
Yeah, but it's
Maybe
easy and cheap to deliver Marlboros and Coca-Cola. It's not easy and cheap to
that's
deliver 5G. It's a different thing altogether. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And again, I mean, 5G, Marlboro, Coca-Cola, they're all distractions and they're all symptoms. And I don't think any of them would exist without the monetary system. And so when everything becomes free and everything becomes entirely voluntary, then we'll actually get what we want because we'll be the ones installing it. And if we, i.e. humanity collectively,
Yeah, and
don't
we,
really want
humanity collectively, would demand some fucking testing before putting this thing in.
it.
If there's
That's
a chance
safe.
radiation is going to increase likelihood of cancers and and brain tumors and stuff, fucking do some testing. But yeah, no, I mean, from the people who are out there on the scary side of it, what they are saying is very, very, very scary. That actually very short exposures to this has significant and is way outside of recommended doses of radiation.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, and it's just being rolled out willy-nilly. But like I said, it won't affect me, except when I go back to the UK. Then it will. It will affect me then, because the UK will definitely have it. We'll be one of the first
Yeah,
ones.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Greymouth may not have it. I don't know.
So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about, because when we communicated by text a week or two ago, you said that you thought you might have a genuine chance of becoming the mayor of Greymouth. So
That's right. I'm throwing everything at it. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the fastest route.
Yeah,
The
so
fastest route.
what does the opposition look like?
Older, heavier, still white and middle class, but very what do you call it? Blue church.
Yeah,
Very
okay.
conventional. And to be honest with you, I have a field day with being on stage with these people in public because it's just, at the end of the day, precocious or otherwise, we're right.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you stick with the truth, you can't go wrong. And what you said about the politicians with a off the cuff question, sort of the trouble with that is they have to balance a million competing interests.
Exactly.
To answer the question, don't they? Whereas when you just tell the truth, it's like a kid who's lied in the past. Okay, so who did break the vase then? If you just own that, if you tell the truth, you can't go wrong, can you? You cannot go wrong.
And you have to remember all the lies that you told. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Man. And of course, the poor politicians, etc., of today have this ridiculous balancing act that in the resource-based economy world, we do not have to play anymore. You just tell the truth and the science will guide you as to the correct response.
Yeah.
It's not even difficult. And I was astounded. The very first public outing I made at a mayoral level when I was contesting the Nelson mayoralty in 2013. And I had a lovely prepared speech and the mayor candidate's got 5 minutes. And we had 450 people in the audience. I mean, I was shitting myself, but this is great. Right, I'm going to talk about Spaceship Earth and how it's going to work in a resource-based economy. And I discovered, it's amazing how you can lose and win in the same few minutes. But I discovered that scripted speeches with this kind of material do not work. We're not teaching people anything new. We're de-brainwashing them. And so everyone's got their own custom brainwash, and you've got to look them in the eye and have a conversation of some sort and figure out, where are you stuck with this? What's your personal hang-up with what I'm proposing? Because everyone's got a different version. So my scripted speech was rubbish. But when it came to the questions and answers.
Yeah.
This big audience had a lot of questions about healthcare, about violence, about alcohol in society, about jobs, pollution. I realized that I had the easiest job of all. And although I was by far the least experienced of the 4 candidates for the mayoralty, I was able to genuinely put my hand up for every single question from the audience immediately without even having to think.
Yeah.
When you start thinking in money-free terms,
Yeah.
suddenly every problem we've got becomes easily soluble.
Yeah. You're free to think. You're free to think in terms of, like Jack Fresco said, you're free to think in terms of, do we have the technology? Do we have the resources? Do we have the manpower? Yes, right, let's do it.
Okay, that's it.
That's it. Yeah, it's not. Is this interest going to be upset? Are they going to let us do it? Are we going to be able to borrow the money? Can we finance it? Can we issue the bonds? Blah 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 blah. All of that gone.
Yeah.
Advocates of money, however, would say that the necessity to raise finance for a project is a effective barrier to bad projects not being undertaken.
I don't know. Would historical precedent prove that theory? I don't know. How many good projects have been undertaken? Yeah, I would say, I guess now we have the scientific method to, and at the end of the day, you know, even the most charismatic, brilliant, inspirational leader is not going to get much of a project together if it doesn't suit the community that it involves. And I would say, yeah, I guess you're right to a degree in that the money filters out the crap projects.
Yeah, people aren't going to invest in something that they think is shit, right? Because they're not going to risk their money on it, and so it's a good barrier to shit not happening.
Unless it makes money, in which case shit will happen anyway.
Well, that's the thing. The definition of what shit means now changes to what will or will not make money. No, absolutely right.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the resource-based economy, because now you've got a self-referencing automated process whereby the technology assists in the project, so no one has to mix concrete by hand, no one has to dig holes, no one has to hammer nails in anymore. We've got amazing technology to do that, so that's all easy. If we want to do something, do it easily. But you're still going to need I was going to say buy-in, I'll have to look for a better word, the investment, still need a better word. This money thing goes deep. You still need the involvement of the humans to make it actually happen.
You still need cooperation. You still need the ability for people to collaborate and cooperate on a large scale. I mean, you know, they're still going to need to build things like bridges and tunnels.
Oh, and hospitals, absolutely.
And hospitals and, well, maybe not airports, but, you know, the
power plants, roads.
Yeah, whatever it might be. You know, there are large scale projects which still need to be undertaken and which affect people over a large area, you know what I mean, and benefit people over a large area, but then there are also people it doesn't affect and doesn't benefit. And so I mean, this is where I get a little bit confused, and this is where I personally, maybe I'm just not smart enough to see it, I personally have a problem with detailed transition plans, because I don't know, part of me, I guess it goes back to what I was saying before about transiting from one equilibrium to another, means that you go through a chaotic phase and there's no way of knowing what the next equilibrium is going to be look like from that chaotic phase. And so I kind of feel that the path to RBE, or something similar to it, something that embraces those philosophies, is most likely going to end up not being anything that anyone has thought of yet. You know what I mean? It's something that will emerge from the collective when there are enough people working on the various problems that we're going to encounter. And you know what I mean? Something will emerge that, as of yet, we have no idea what it looks like.
No, it does take some imagineering, doesn't it? And as Colin would put, actually, Colin Turner from Free World Charter, who I know, I saw your interview, he as he beautifully, so eloquently put, to really get this, you have to suspend your disbelief on several levels at the same time. And it takes quite a lot of mental, certainly energy to bring that about. But I would say have faith, because when we get to the final product, the RB World, this bloody dog. You know, a dog is always on the wrong side of a door, isn't it? It's just the older he gets, just come on, fuck, you just went out. Oh, hello, I'm back. The self-referencing is massive, and at the moment, the example I use at the moment, if say that the breadwinner in a household drives a truck for Coca-Cola, okay, those big red trucks, and they carry around 50 tons of Coke, and they deliver it to supermarkets and towns all over the country. And everyone in the family, in fact, everyone in the country knows that those kind of drinks aren't very good for us. But because of the money thing, everybody right down the food chain, you know, in our local dairy, there's 19 Coca-Cola signs, you know, just a little country dairy in Wakefield. So it's very, very well promoted. Although nobody really wants their children to have it, but nevertheless, you know,
they all do. Well, not all, but most do. Yeah.
And of course, right down to the manufacturing and delivery, you know, the person that drives that truck, they get paid to do that, and they can thus provide for their family. Thank you, mummy or daddy. That's how we get the things we need. So we kind of, oh well, yeah, we wouldn't drink it, but that's, you got to do a job, you know, fair enough. But after money, now the family and the community and the support structure of that truck driver, who he currently supports with his local contribution because of the money that he gets from his job, he doesn't need that money anymore because everything that he used to buy with it is now supplied for free. So what's the point in going? Is he going to go as a volunteer when A, it's taking him away from his family and his community where he's really wanted as a human being, and B, they collectively know that what he's doing is actually detrimental to society's health as a whole. So
and
basically,
and in the community that they're living, they're actually growing plenty of oranges and apples and carrots and shit like that, and they're making their own juice, and it's much nicer, and they don't want fucking Coke anymore.
Yeah. And they don't need the truck, they don't need to go away, and no one has rotten teeth anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But if suddenly he gets a call, and let's say Westport has had an earthquake, and they need food, they need blankets, they need relief goods and machinery because of their disastrous situation, will that truck driver get the support of his community, his family, his society?
Yeah.
Of course he will. And we've seen evidence of this with the disasters that happen here every few months. It's just still a pretty
there's a saying, I can't remember who it is, there's a saying that when things go really, really, really badly, we revert to communism. Because it's the only thing that actually works.
Quite brilliant. Yeah,
it is brilliant, isn't it? It's fucking true. It's absolutely true.
And the Christchurch earthquakes proved that enormously. I mean, the government completely, oh my God, what do we do? And we end up with a farming army, they're called, because the farmers have got big machinery, tractors, trailers, food stores, equipment, and all these farmers got together, or have a quick ring round. Of course, they're all related. They all know each other. It's it's a tiny country. And they got together with the gear that they needed to actually help those people out. And then about the same time, the student army, there's a couple of universities in Christchurch, which, after the earthquake, there was no classes. The kids, well, what do we do? Oh, well, let's go and help these people. And together with the farmers and all their equipment, they basically took over the city. It was incredible. And they went door to door. The place is covered in mud, and there's all these houses falling down and no electricity, water all over the place. These kids went door to door. All right, love, what do you need? Oi, we're going to need a tractor over here to lift this. She's going to need some food. She's got a baby coming. And they sorted it all out. And it's an amazing, and again, a very visible and recent demonstration of what people do if you let them, And
that's a really nice story. I wasn't aware of that. That's a really, really nice story.
Yeah. And everybody remembers it like it was yesterday.
Of course they do. It's a proper human, uplifting story, isn't it? I like to think that's how we behave most of the time, given the opportunity to do so. Do you know what I mean? That's how I like. That's I mean, it's not something you can prove, but that's what I like to believe. That's my article of faith, if you like.
Yeah, yeah. And that's also part of my chaos interim segment, whereby you'll get little opportunities to dart forward into the future. Oh, what's RBE going to be like? Oh, well, hang on. In 2010, 2011, we experienced it, didn't we?
Yeah.
And I mean, the volunteering here is astounding. If you chair a bloody school committee in England, you get a fucking gong for it, don't you? Whereas here, everybody's doing something like that all the time. And the ambulance service, St. John's Ambulance, I mean, it's the ambulance service is 75% voluntary here, as is the fire service. And so people know about volunteering already, and then if it's quite easy just to extend that. So why don't we make your job voluntary? And then people have to think, well, what do I do? Does it contribute anything? And another great thing about New Zealand is the access to data. Government data. We kind of lead the world in the depth of that they've got. They've been really thorough in that, for the most part. Anyway, certainly better than most countries. And it's very up to date and it's very transparent and accessible. And we did a big survey, actually, Glenn Timms and I, a good colleague of mine, and only 27% of all work done in this country is just managing money. So that they don't actually produce anything tangible whatsoever, nothing. So advertising, marketing, sales, banking, investment, accountancy, they're just juggling numbers. And those people can instantly retire. So when what can I do? I can retire. Oh. And of course, you can retire with all the accoutrements that you gained through your endeavors previously, because you didn't contribute towards the manufacture of boats or holiday houses,
food
or sports furniture. You had no part in their construction, because that was all done by people who actually produce things, and of course, machines. So you can continue to enjoy your luxury lifestyle, but just please don't go to the office and predate upon everybody else anymore. Because in fact,
you'll be making a massive contribution just by stopping doing that.
Yeah, just go on fucking holiday. Don't sell my kids any more shit. Incredible. And because it gets better. This is the fantastic thing about RBE. When you start to think about it, oh my God, it's even better than I thought. Those people, and we all went to school. Well, there weren't many at my school, but we grew up with them. Which kids at college and things were the ones that got into finance and banking and investment? They were the proactive, hardworking, motivated, intelligent, driven people, and they still are. And they do things that are ostensibly successful because it produces great fruits for them. There's nothing wrong with aspiring to that. But once we retire those people, they're not just going to sit around and do nothing.
No, that's right.
What do they do at weekends? They do fucking social work and community restoration and environmental projects, don't they? They do those now. What are they going to do when they're free with their networks? God, the other day I've got a great relationship with my accountant, Saria, and she's been basically on board, which is pretty amazing for an accountant for, nearly 10 years. I mean, what are we going to, because they're so hardworking, these people, they're so proactive. And I think they're going to be a massive part of this, because the accountants know everybody. The same accountant, the same person can be an accountant for an environmental group, a church, a school, a village organization. The government even has accountants, a business, a marketing company, all these things, they all associate through the same accountant, frequently at top level, at principal level in the organization. So flip over to the non-money world. And of course, these accountants, they always have bloody big schemes for fundraising and doing good in the community. I mean, I think most of it well meant on the whole, actually. Now we're freeing them up to use their networks. So when we have let's say we need a new sewage system in our remote village, I'll go to my accountant, not to say where can I get the money, but where can I get the resources to fix the sewage system.
Who do you know? Yeah, that's right. Who do you know who deals with concrete or whatever? Yeah.
Who's got the science? Who's got the diggers? Who's got the pipes? That kind of thing. And
that's
these people know
That's
everybody.
interesting to hear you talk about Because I think a lot of people in the Zeitgeist movement and the Venus Project, and perhaps in the RBE movement in general, see money as an evil, and by extension, at least to a degree, anyone who works in the field of money as being evil. So it's really nice. No, but it's really nice to see you thinking that actually they've got a very valuable, real contribution to make. And you're quite right to say that in many cases they are actually the best and the brightest of us who go into these fields, and that we would do well to harness that, to harness those energies and skills and intelligence for for better end. No, absolutely, absolutely. No, so that's really nice to hear. I can understand why you are so successful at this, because you look to find the best. You look to find the best in people, don't you? You look to see everyone as an asset rather than an enemy.
It's so rewarding, because it's sort of win-win. You can't really go wrong with that. Yeah, it seems to every conversation seems to be positively contributing, rather than goodies and baddies, friends and enemies, and it probably is a bit naive, but I do see everybody as just victims of this system. And we've all become horribly corrupted by it. And especially, again, on the West Coast, where everyone has such a recent or relevant experience of tragedy, their humanity is that much closer to the surface. And you really don't have to talk to somebody, especially if you are sincere and impassioned, you don't have to talk to people for very long before they say, yeah, you're right, mate, we've got to do something.
Yeah.
Whereas in much of the rest of the country, where I've done a lot of my sort of street work, it's frequently the people still think they're going to be okay. They're still, oh no, we're going to make it. Oh, my daughter's doing great at university. My son's got another business, and and they won't go there. The cognitive dissonance is too strong to dare to penetrate into the real. I was
making this point in the conversation I had with Nick the other day, that for a lot of people, I see it a lot in the UK, that kind of person where, they've got a lot invested in their lives today. They've got kids, they've got a career, they've got a mortgage, they've got responsibilities, they've got a family, they've got a network of friends, they've got membership of the club, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
RBE is a long way from that. It's a really, really, really radical shift of perspective. Exactly what you said before. That's fundamentally what it is a shift of perspective. And once you've made it, you look back and think, wow, that was really fucking easy. But from the other side of it, it's not like that, right? It's so we do need to be infinitely patient and compassionate with those who are, as you say, victims of they're traumatized, aren't they?
Yes. But, it's proto-traumatic stress disorder.
Right, yeah, okay. You mentioned Gabor Maté earlier on. I'm a massive fan of his as well. He's all about trauma.
Yeah, and we're in it now. It's not post-traumatic, it's now.
Yeah.
So no wonder you can't get their attention, because they're fucking in a bunker dodging bullets, So they're not going to listen to a lovely concept.
Being traumatized every day. It's not like it's trauma in the past and it's over and you can try and deal with it. It's really, reinforcing all the time, every day.
Yeah. And just going back slightly to, for want of a better expression, to have a therapy session. Not many therapy sessions take place in foxholes, are they? You've got to get out, get away from the danger zone, get back to somewhere safe, somewhere comfortable, have a drink, use the toilet, sit down in a chair. Let's talk about where we get to. And when people are so traumatized, they're so superficial, they're so busy, rushing around, thinking in their superficial top, whatever it is, 5% of their brain, they do not have the time or the inclination, when you've got a fire burning in your backyard,
absolutely,
to take this on. Whereas on the coast, they never really wanted the modern accoutrements of the 21st century. And I try not to get too far off the topic here, but I think it's frequently I've had, oh, you'll never get the coasters to accept this, Richard. They're so resistant to change. And they are resistant to change, but only if that change is bollocks.
Yeah.
and so many of the changes in the last 50 years have been bollocks, haven't they?
Yeah.
Oh, you need faster broadband. You need another pair of shoes. You need a different color car.
Oh,
And
I've
that's,
got to
well,
say,
I've got
the
to.
broadband thing, I'm personally on board. I remember dial-up. Dial-up was a fucking.
Yeah.
So I'm all for broadband. But yeah,
But then you probably remember writing letters
nevertheless
and
was.
going to visit your neighbour, don't you? You know, yeah. Go down the pub and have a talk with someone rather
Yeah,
than,
but these things are not mutually exclusive, right? You can still go down the pub and have a chat with your neighbour, and you can still have broadband at home so that you can, educate yourself on YouTube or
Yes.
have a Skype
Yeah.
call with your daughter overseas or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not taking a position. But on the West Coast, they've got a reputation for being anti-progress, but I think with very good reason, in that most progress has been pointless and it's just
Yeah,
been
they would think of
predatory.
themselves as being discerning, not anti-progress,
Yeah,
but a
yeah,
discerning folk. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And one of the things I've really got excited about, probably the most, is that they want to talk. And whereas on the rest of the country, the response I've got for 10 years of doing this is generally, oh, lovely to see you, because everybody knows everybody, that's great. How are you getting on? Oh, well done, that sounds really exciting. What really drives me nutty is good luck, as if this is my cause and it's not, you obviously you're not concerned with climate change or freaking inequality, that's just my thing, because I know you're busy. And then sort of, I've got to shoot off. Lovely to see you. Yes, flick me an email. I'd love to see the new website.
Yeah.
And that.
Yeah, well, that is the world we live in, my friend. Unfortunately, that is the
world. It's the world that the West Coast does not live in.
Right.
Because on the West Coast, everybody says hello to everybody all the time. I mean, all the cars wave at each other.
They want to know how you're doing and how you're getting on, and are interested in hearing.
And they want to stop and talk. And so, are you from around here? So what's that all about? And of course, running for mayor immediately opens so why do you want to be mayor then? What can you do here? And off we go. And then after that, and what is astounding, and you probably won't put this on any video, hopefully, is that frequently all I've done is say hello to their dog or enjoy the view together or talk about the weather, and they say, I'll vote for you.
Yeah. Well, you're probably the only candidate that's actually been a straightforward human being around them.
Yeah. And I think people.
Sorry, something you said before made me think of a question for you. You've got to balance two things, haven't you, in your candidacy for mayor? On the one hand, you've got actual responsibilities to the actual people living there right now today, right?
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you've also got a larger responsibility to the RBE movement, because this is a stepping stone, this is a springboard to greater publicity, greater notoriety, greater ability to speak about it in public where people will listen, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you've got to balance these two things. So to what extent, no, let me slightly rephrase that. How seriously are you taking the first part of that, your mayoral duties to the citizens of your town?
Yeah, okay. I've known quite a few mayors, and with the greatest respect, to a large degree, is a ceremonial role.
Right.
They don't actually have that much executive authority.
So you're not like the chairman of the board of the council kind of thing?
Yes, you are, but you're only the chairman, and you don't have a special casting vote. You have the same validity vote as the other councillors, who are all elected, who are most definitely well-embedded locals.
And you don't have any influence in tabling the contents of what's being discussed?
Yeah, you do, but at the end of the day, it's, especially here, it's extremely transparent. People are very interested in council activities here. I'd say much more so in the UK. Again, everybody knows everybody. It's all much more local, much more familiar with everybody. And so the mayoral role, there's not. Yeah, I mean, you get access to things that you wouldn't otherwise.
So when you say it's ceremonial, are you sort of saying that you have no more power than any other councillor, kind of thing? Is that what you're saying, or that you don't even have as much power as a normal councillor?
No, you have the same power as a normal councillor, but not much more. Only because of you're probably more likely to be on the radio or get quoted in the paper or go to conferences because you're mayor. But you don't actually get to make any decisions by yourself.
Okay.
And of course, I don't really know anything about local government, you know, to be bluntly honest. It's just, you know, I haven't done this before.
So it's
I
not
haven't
like
been.
an American mayor where, you know, you're allocating the resources to your police department and schools and so on. You're not.
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
Okay.
And in terms of democratic, I would say this is probably the most democratic country in the world. You know, that kind of thing is fiercely defended and very transparent. And yeah, it's about as good as you could do it, actually. You know, yeah. There's an old boy network, but for the most part, it worked fairly well, actually. But that's changing because the old boys don't know what to do.
So should you win, you would actually be able to concentrate primarily on role number 2 then, i.e. using it as a platform to publicise RBE to a wider audience.
Yeah. And
Maybe
the short
springboard for a national campaign, yeah? Is that kind of on your horizon, are you thinking?
I'll come back to the first question in a second. Well, of course, we've got the Money-Free Party and we've got general elections in 2020. So that may be a point of contention for me. If I am mayor, do I drop the mayoralty to become a member of parliament?
Well, only if you win, right? You wouldn't have to drop it just to run, would you? Or would you? Would you have to drop it just to run?
No, you don't have to drop it to run, but if you win, you do. And
Okay.
then there'd have to be a by-election, which are expensive and time-consuming and just annoying. And of course, it's happened quite a few times. The locals, well, in instances that I've seen in the past, and I guess everyone is different, the locals have been really pissed off at being abandoned by the person who voted in.
I can completely understand that. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so he's pursuing his own ambitions.
Absolutely, you never gave a shit about us. Yeah. I get that. Yeah.
On the other hand, if you have the people behind you, then it might be say, "Go on, go for it. It's only ceremonial. We can just get another mayor. You go on all the way, son." You know. So it probably depends on how things are going at the time. Just to finish off the question, yeah, there are plenty of mayoral duties: cutting ribbons, kissing babies, that kind of thing. But the way I see it, because I do like to keep things succinct if possible, believe it or not, the council machine is a big, cumbersome one of many wheels turning very slowly. And the position of mayor really is just part of that machine. What you do have is the ability to direct that machine. So with the right vision, one can point the machine in the right direction. But we're not going to become a money-free town overnight. You know.
Yeah, but you do so by bringing people along with you, right? Not by telling them this is what we're doing, but by convincing them. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is how it should be.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose it's just human nature, but it seems bizarre to me that once you're mayor, suddenly you have relevance, you have authority, you have that. Suddenly what you said the day before now has more gravitas.
Yeah, no one gave a shit yesterday, now they all want to hear.
Yeah. And that's...
Yeah, well, we've groomed from a very, very, very early age to obey authority, to, you know... And it runs deep. I can't remember what the name of, but they're very famous, the experiments where, you know, they had the person behind the wall who was answering questions. When they got one wrong, they told a guy in white told the guy to push the punishment button, and it gives an electric shock to the other person. They turn the button all the way up, and if the guy insists, if the guy in the white coat insists, they'll turn it all the way up to death. I mean, it's not actually happening, right? But yeah, I mean, amazing how deep it runs in most people. It's amazing how deep it runs. If an authority figure essentially absolves you of personal responsibility by telling you to do something, people will do almost anything, as evidenced by the fact that, you know, I'm sure very nice young men are happy to drop bombs on villages during wartime. You know what I mean? Stick a uniform on them and give them orders. You know, I'm sure they're really nice people, most of them.
Yeah. Can I have a go at why I think Greymouth is the only place in the world that we can begin this?
Yeah, go.
Just because I do, and I've said it in public now on Facebook and things, on a page. It's called Love Greymouth, and it's just a local thing. And there's pictures of sunsets and dogs and things, and it's very. But occasionally we get going with a good conversation. And I've said that I think it is actually the last bastion of human civilization because of several factors. One, I'll start off with is the disparity, which is really important. Greymouth is not the most deprived place in the world, but it probably is the most deprived place in the world relative to the aspirations of the rest of the country. So New Zealand, as I said, it probably is one of the most civilized countries. You know, we have the world-leading animal welfare legislation, voting for women, human rights, freedom of speech, you know, are fiercely defended.
Sorry, 1
here.
second. Anyway, so yeah, you're talking about disparity between their sort of the expectations of a nation and the realities of the lives of people on the West Coast.
Yeah, which I think drives the change, because it's, you know, worse in the Congo, you know, than they are on the West Coast. But then their expectations and aspirations are nothing like as high. So there isn't the driver for the change. And I think, so we lead the world in bowel cancer, or third in obesity, suicide, heart disease. We're right up there.
Congratulations, well played.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? In this, you know, it is pretty amazing place, and yet there's all these ghastly problems, and they're even worse. They're exacerbated on the West Coast, so they know all about that there. But we have this reputation, aspirations, expectations to be world leading. Yes, over 300,000 children living below the poverty line in this country. And that's derived by
that's out of a population of what, 4.5 million?
A total of four and a bit million.
Yeah.
So it's basically a quarter of children live below the poverty line. I mean, and of course, no one's got a clue to do about it. Not at all, apart from sell more dairy. That has its own problems. But so it's a funny dynamic in that we've got these expectations, we've got this situation, but we've also still got, and only on the West Coast, we've still got the human relations that have generally been lost in the modern world. So most countries with similar aspirations, expectations, etc., have lost their human connections. So, you know, in most towns, people don't even know their neighbor anymore. And I mean, of course, many do, but that's massively broken down, and no one's really got time to talk to anybody anymore, which is huge on the coast. You know, everybody wants to talk, and they've known their neighbor, you know, because they both grew up in those houses, that kind of thing. So you've still got a very strong community social fabric that I think has generally been torn apart in what we call more civilized nations. So the Congo, they probably still do know most of the people in the village, but they're all poor, and they're just happy if they survive to adulthood. Whereas in a more sophisticated country, yeah, they have higher standards, etc., but they've lost the human connections. Whereas in Greymouth, they seem to have retained those human connections. They have the expectations of a very first world country, but they've got the reality of almost a third world country. And so that disparity drives an enormous frustration, and I guess you could almost say it demonstrates that chaos that comes with the transition from one regime to the next, you know, because it's such a bizarre situation. You know, we've got all this utter abundance, and yet everybody's struggling.
Yeah.
You know, even the people with jobs are so stressed that they're on bloody drugs and alcohol and eating all the wrong food and fighting. And you know, just like growing up in the UK, I remember the term from the 1970s, intergenerational unemployment, you know, and what that has that effect on a social psyche, you know, what that does to people's psychology. Yeah. And so you have this funny combination of all these different factors.
Not so much the unemployment, it's the sense of not feeling like you're making any kind of a contribution to anything, isn't it? I mean, plus, of course, no money coming in, but I mean, that psychologically, that's secondary, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. except with our modern devices now, you know, it is secondary, but of course you can no longer afford the things that you aspire to. So everyone expects to have their own jet boat, widescreen TV, 2 bathrooms in every bedroom, yet no one can afford it. So yeah, so again, there's a disparity there. The expectation is very high, but the actual reality is very, very low.
Well,
and in Greymouth, there's only about
sorry, go on.
When there's only about 10,000 people, and there are 2,500 houses that are not yet connected to the sewage system. In a town, you know, they're still on septic tanks, and there's actually a government requirement that started about 10 years ago to update this kind of thing, but they just cannot afford to do it. And I was having a cup of tea in a lady's house the other day, and she, in a 1940s house, and this is so typical, and it still had the original wiring from the 1940s. And this is very typical. None of these people can afford to fix their houses up because they haven't got any money. Post health and safety legislation, etc., even to get your chimney, you know, you have to put scaffolding up and do a health and safety assessment. Oh my God, the cost of that. So basically it means it's no one's done anything. The value of property as a whole has fallen in the region because there's no work. So nobody will lend them the money to do the work. And many people are in negative equity. And suddenly the whole thing spirals down. You know? And we haven't even talked about earthquake risk yet, which is represented throughout the town itself, in that many, many of the commercial buildings are no longer fit for purpose. Because post-Christchurch, the whole country had an assessment of the building stock done by engineers, and they realised, fuck, if we had an earthquake like that here, this would fall down. And who can afford to pay to fix it up? Nobody. So consequently, the businesses are leaving town in droves because they can't afford to fix the building that they're in. The landlord can't afford to fix it.
Insurance companies won't insure them, presumably.
Won't go near them, And in fact, that came out the other day because the insurance company's having a bit of a field day at the moment because they're shit scared of the whole thing. And when, as we discovered here, when an insurance company won't insure you, then the bank won't lend you the money. So you don't end up living in a house that's not insured. You end up being evicted from the house because the bank, their investment covered by insurance. So it's doubly bad, actually. And equally, the general infrastructure in Greymouth is all struggling as well. You know, I mean, that's nationwide. And I think in the UK too, actually, you know, underwater pipes, sewage, tubes, etc. are, you know, they do a lot of work.
So what would you hope to do about this crumbling infrastructure? I mean, what would you, as mayor, as an advocate / mayor, be able to bring to the table to solve these problems?
Okay, 2 answers. And this is where it's absolutely imperative to have the people on board. And depending on how on board they are, depends on which road we'll travel. And I guess it'll probably end up being a combination of both. But one is, if the people are really behind me, and if we've had the RBE conversation with enough people, by the way, they're frequently called feral inbreds. But this event that I was at 2 weeks ago was partly in the celebration of May Day, you know, which is a great socialism event globally. But this little village where we had the event was the original seat of both the Communist Party and the Labour Party in this country in the early part of the last century. It was also the site of the very first organised industrial action in 1908 in New Zealand history, the very first strike. And that has not been forgotten. They are a very revolutionary bunch. So to answer your question, there are 2 things we could do. We can either go money free straight away and fuck it. And then, because the revolutionaries are not just the hippies in the woods.
And so, sorry, can I just pause you for 1 minute there? So by going money free straight away, you mean, or correct me if I'm wrong, but by that I get that you mean, okay, so whatever, potholes need fixing. So who's got the trucks? Who's got the gravel? Who's got the time? Yeah, who can wield the shovel? Let's get out there and fix these potholes. And you know, put notice boards up and whatever, and recruit people to do the things that need doing. Is that essentially what you mean?
Yeah, fuck 'em. We won't wait for central government to provide the money. We'll just go and fucking do it. And there's already a history of that. There's 3 mayors on the coast. Mine is by far the biggest one. But the most southern one, Bruce Smith, is under censure at the moment by the council overseers because he and a mate, when there's some flood remedial work needed to be done in a hurry, they just went out with their diggers and their fucking great big trucks. His mate is like 80 and he owns a big construction company, and they just went out and they just fucking did it. Of course, subsequently, there was a bill of $1.5 million for the council, which they then freaked out about because they hadn't gone through the transparency 10-year bollocks procedures. But this is the nature of these people, you know. And because, again, you know, I said everybody throughout the food chain has been touched by tragedy. They're not of a mind to just wait for central government to come up with some funding. There's only 4 roads in and out of this whole region, and they all go through narrow gorges through the mountains. I mean, you could close them off.
God, I'd love to see this, Richard. I really would. I'd love to. You're inspiring me, man. I'd love to see this. When is the election?
October 12th.
October 12th. Okay. All right. I'll try and find some kind of information service on the internet where I can get exit poll data and stuff.
The other way it could go, and I said this in a closing statement in the newspaper, I was really chuffed to have the last say after the very first my first mayoral election, 2013. My advice, they rang everybody, the 4 candidates after the election. What do you think of the result? And of course, you just fucking, you know, oh, weren't we wonderful, darling, kind of thing. It's not a time for being silly. You know, you get one closing statement and the whole show is over. I said in the paper, and I still quite like it, in that depending on how revolutionary the people of Greymouth are, the other option is just to borrow the money and fix all this stuff, because we will never have to pay it back.
Who will lend it to you?
Oh, there seems to be plenty of. I mean, the council debt in Greymouth is about 30 million. The council debt in where I live now in this region is about 120 million.
So you think you got 90 million you can borrow? Yeah?
Well, I mean, this is how bizarre it is. And I've got one of my favorite expressions is it'll either make money or it'll make sense, but it won't make both. You know, again, it's part of that chaos theory. You know, things make sense or they make money, but if it makes money, it won't make sense. So bizarrely, entities will lend money to district councils because they have a lot of valuable infrastructure. That bridge is worth $10 million. That shopping centre is worth $50 million. That's how they price this.
They're getting liens on these assets. I mean, if you fail to pay it back, do they then own the shopping centre or the bridge?
Well, I mean, which brings another delightful. So a version of that is we won't close the road. We will just have a boycott on bills. So from this day forward, and we have a lot of meetings first, but from this day forward, we just will not pay our mortgages, rent, rates, electricity, etc. And what are they actually going to do? Because all the banking here is Australian owned, basically. Is the Australian Savings Bank going to come here and repossess 10,000 fucking shacks in the middle of nowhere? What are you going to do? You know,
I don't know about the utilities, but the mortgages, definitely. I love it with the mortgages. And while you're at it, you could make that argument that was made in the Zeitgeist movie, the second one, I think it was, that all mortgages are illegal contracts. They are all, every single last one of them, fraudulent contracts.
Yeah, that's right. We might even do it through the courts.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, at the very least, you can make a splash in the papers about it. You know what I mean? Because they are fraudulent contracts. I mean, by the way,
absolutely.
The foundation of the law, do you know what I mean? Where consideration on both sides has to be put up, they are fraudulent. There's no two ways.
They have no consideration. Yeah, absolutely.
So I like that. But I tell you what, I like the first idea the best, going full RBE straight away. I like it. Right, this is the shit he's doing. We've got the skill base. We've got the equipment. Whatever, you know, between us, we've got it. Let's figure it out, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're in charge of doing that. You're in charge of doing that. You're in charge of doing that. Crack on.
Yeah. And if you don't do it, it's your reputation, mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And half the beneficiaries are your family. So
absolutely.
go and get the fucking digger.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things people most are frustrated about is despite, and these are, they're coasters. So they have amazing resilience and initiative and drive. It's pioneer country, really. They're very resourceful. One of the things that's it's another one of these disparities. These people have enormous capability. They're miners, farmers, sailors. They can do anything, and yet they're fucked because of this system from outside.
Yeah.
They can't even provide for their own family now, despite being capable of doing anything. They can't even provide for their family because of this fucking system that says you have to have the special tokens, never mind all the diggers or the fuel or the chainsaws or the... No. If you haven't got the tokens, the family starves, and the wife leaves and the kids are on fucking drugs. And that has already happened, so they're hurting like mad because of this, And when I was I've been at work the last couple of days doing mechanic work, and I tend to wear the same clothes all the time. But on the coast, they are especially anti-experts from outside in suits. Here we go. Here's another one. There's an organizer. So I tend to wear this kind of thing. And I thought, for your video, what should I? Oh, yeah, okay. And I've never, generally I'll put on a shirt, have a shave, kind of. But they don't want shirt and a shave. They want
we're
fucking.
pretty cash here. We're pretty cash. It sounds to me like I'd like these West Coast folk.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, they're good, solid, fucking, handshake people.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really are. I love going there. It's fantastic. It's such a boost, to come. Every conversation I come away, again, further up the scale of holy fucking shit, we're going to do this, And thus I'm throwing everything at it's funny, a sort of dilemma between recruiting RBE supporters and recruiting voters.
Is it not kind of the same thing or not? How do they differ, those two things?
Well, it depends how long you've got, because I wouldn't want to go in the newspaper, for example, and have two column inches explaining this fucking communist anarchist hippie from outside fancies being mayor. Because they wouldn't put the material across in a way that was palatable to most people. Whereas if I can have a conversation with those people, then I can guarantee their vote. But, touch wood, basically. But it's got to be the right conversation. And it may be as little as, oh my God, what a lovely dog. Hello, what's his name? Or it may be 20 minutes of profound anarchism, having a proper chat. But it's got to be measured, and it's very, very personal. So, and what I've done in the past, through bitter experience, is go too far too soon. We've all got these, again, coming back to the airplanes analogy, where you're doing everything by performance envelopes. You can only do so much. It's the same with humans. We can talk about a money-free future, but don't go blasting, right, we're going to make everything free tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. He's lost it. He doesn't have a rational grip on.
Yeah, I kind of don't like the whole money-free. I don't like the name money-free party. I think it leads people down the wrong path of thinking. Because it's not really about money free, is it? It's not about taking money away. It's about creating a system whereby money no longer serves a function. It just no longer has a purpose. So and once you get it, then you get that. But given that, trying to recruit is maybe the wrong word, but you know what I mean. I've never liked the name. I've never liked it.
No. Well, hence.
Before.
Tell me about it. And we've fucking done that ever since the start, with Nick especially. I went and stayed with his family to try and nut it out, and we didn't get anywhere with that. But consequently, I'm very, very sensitive to that. And I'm just going outside for a minute. So this is, I don't know if you've seen the bus.
Well, only pictures of it. I've never actually seen the bus.
This is the campaign bus.
Yeah, it's awesome.
This will cost a fucking fortune, by the way. So this is the number plate.
Very good.
How is that reversed to you, or is that the right way around?
No, that's right. That's right.
Okay. How's the future looking? And the website. And this is all IRBE, so Institute of Resource-Based Economics. At the moment, we've got this logo on the side, which is now sort of internationally, I'll say, recognised as the money-free logo, but not money-free party, just money-free New Zealand, money-free France, money-free USA, whatever.
Okay.
This will, when we get closer to election time, it'll say Vote Richard, and a special website that we're building called coastwise.nz, which is specifically for Greymouth and this particular election. It's not a global money-free thing at all. And then on the back, we've got the big logo.
Looks great. Looks
Yeah.
great. Who did that
really
for you? That's really nice. That's really nicely done. Who did that for you?
Yeah, no, a really cool outfit called Bad Boy Graphics over in Greymouth, bizarrely. Yeah.
So have you not been able to call upon like-minded souls to give of their time and work for free in order to help you along? Well, I guess you probably have on some occasions and not on others, right?
Yes, some stuff, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, Bad Boy Graphics are giving us quite a break, but yeah. I mean, the materials are expensive, for example. So
Yeah.
I've put my cup of tea down. I have to rewind the video to find the tea. Yeah. But yes, so we're very, very conscious of and cautious with using terminology. But I mean, I've got a pocket full of different cards, depending on the conversation. Should I give them an Institute card or a money-free party card or a sticker or a money-free world card? I mean, again, it's the brainwashing. It's not about me. It's about you.
Yeah.
I liken it to a log jam, in a creek that's all jammed up with logs. Why doesn't your brain work clearly and rationally like it was intended to when you were born? A stream should just run. And if you can have a conversation with that person, you can frequently pick out just one or two logs in that jam, whoosh, and they're away.
Yeah.
And it can take 10 seconds or it can take 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's, but it's, again, it's one of the things that drives me on, especially, forgive me, on the coast, because these people are so crushed. They're so fucking downtrodden and depressed. When you come along with something like this, they are aflame, and that is a fantastic thing to behold, to be part of that, setting people free again, and awakening all that lovely energy and passion and compassion that's been so shut down for so long.
Yeah.
It's a profound experience, and it really drives me along, which I guess brings me back to where we started. The energy comes from the people, not from me. I get it from them, to see people coming alive. It's fantastic to be part of it. Yeah, privilege, actually. Yeah.
Not that I'm likening you to Mother Teresa, but I remember seeing an interview with Mother Teresa a while ago in which she was asked, how is it you live in those conditions and look at all of that suffering year in, year out, how is it you've managed to do that? And she said, no, you don't understand. When I look into the faces of these people, I see it is God staring back at me. You know what I mean? How can, as far as she's concerned, she's living an exalted life. You know what I mean? She feels privileged to be able to do what she's doing. So, it's again, back to the idea of perspective, it is perspective. Yeah. It's lovely having your own mountain water. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's just lovely.
Isn't it? Fantastic. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, very, very rare actually today. Yeah. Well, of course, that's one of the big New Zealand arguments is, we should sell it. So, and if we bottle it here, then we can
send it off halfway around the world. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. They actually fly it in bottles to China. I mean, oh my God.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is considered to make good business sense because they can turn a profit while they're doing it, right? So it's good business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
But they got to the bottom of that Mariana Trench, the other day in the Pacific, just up the road. The deepest humans have ever gone in the ocean. It's like 11 kilometers deep.
Yeah.
And they found some new species and, amazing, all these glowy, wriggly things. and a load of plastic rubbish. Yeah, brilliant.
Really, even down there? Wow,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah, it's incredible that these places are populated, isn't it? I mean, it's just extraordinary. It
yeah.
just makes you think that anywhere there's water, anywhere there's liquid water, there's going to be stuff wriggling about in it. It doesn't matter where you are, anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah,
Richard,
yeah,
it was
yeah.
a pleasure. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
And yeah, living in times of chaos. I like that. I like that.
Mm.
I've asked that question to a few people, not on these interviews, but I've asked that question to a few people. And you're the first one that has proposed, well, we're in it right now. I like that. I like that. That feels right.
Yeah, that's great. All right, thanks ever so much.
Yeah, take it and keep me updated with anything. And definitely as you approach election time, send me a reminder that it's coming up, because I'm really curious to see how you get on. And if you do win, whether you go full RBE, I really hope so, man. I'd really like to see that. I'd really like to see that. Even if it fails for whatever reason, at least lessons could be learned. You know what I mean? It could be the first proper, I don't know, blue church experiment into RBE, because you enter the blue church when you become mayor, kind of, in a way, don't you?
Kind of. Yeah, that's right.
You become a member of the blue church, kind of.
Yeah.
Although you are secretly a member of the red religion, insurging into the blue church secretly. Yeah,
All
check
right,
out
thank you.
Paul. I think you'll really like it. One of his other themes, just before we go, just made me think of it, talking about him again. I really like the way he covers a massive span of time with one simple thing. So he goes back to whenever, 50, 100,000 years ago, when we first became the dominant species on the planet. Yeah, and we started going off and colonizing all of the niches that they were on the planet and becoming the top predator wherever we went. And so it went in our small groups until we'd colonized every niche on the planet and we started to encounter each other, right? We started to encounter tribes of each other. And at that point, we had to figure out how to collaborate, or at least coexist, without killing each other for the long-term survival of the species, right? And he calls that game A. Everything we've been doing from that time until now is game A. Game A can cope with the complexity of human society, of technology, of medical advances, blah, 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 blah. Game A, the structures of Game A. And the blue church is kind of the key holders for Game A, if you know what I mean. Yeah, Game A is 100%.
Of that.
And so we need to start playing Game B. And you've actually touched on a couple of the features of Game B during this interview. Game B is forming collaborations and networks of people such that information is passed around within the group in such a way that every person who gets access to that information separates out the wheat from the chaff, the signal from the noise, you know what I mean? And passes it on to the others in the group now that it's been refined by them to something more useful, and so on. And the collaboration of the open and willing sharing of information and ideas between this group of people creates an emergent thing. You know, in the same way that the cells of the body create the emergent thing that is the body, that the individual musicians in a jazz band create the emergent thing, which is a living piece of jazz. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. And that Game B is going to be centered around this coherence among people, and that when this coherence can be rolled out across millions and tens of millions of people, that's when we're playing Game B. And so this whole competitive money, politics, power imbalances, all of that has to go, because in order to play Game B, you have to enter into coherence with others, and in order to do that, there can't be personal agendas, ideological agendas. You know what I mean? It's got to be pure. It's got to be clean. So yeah, I really think you'll like him. He's an interesting guy. I really think you'll like him.
Yeah, cool.
All right,
mate. Thanks.
Take it easy. Speak to you soon.
Good on you. Keep in touch.
Yeah,
Cheers, Eric. Bye.
Bye.